All right. Well, it is great to have everybody here and to be able to share with you about our Sailing Ships Semester at Sea program. I'll start with introductions of everybody. I'll start with myself. My name is Jenny Ridley, and I support enrollment for Sailing Ships Maine. And I'm really excited to share everything that's going on with the HARVEY GAMAGE and with our crew here. We have also Pamela Coughlin, who is our captain of the HARVEY GAMAGE, and John Radke, our education director, as well as Brad, who is a parent of a student trainee. And we're all here tonight to share with you about what it's like to spend a semester at sea with us. And hopefully this will give you some visual and verbal information. And we look forward to following up with you and talking more about having your student at sea. So I will transition to just a quick snapshot of what the schooner HARVEY GAMAGE looks like, and Pamela will talk more about the schooner and all the things that are learned while on board. But I would love to invite John to speak to us about the academic program on board the boat, because this is very much a hands-on learning experience with credit involved, which is a big piece of our program on the ship. So John, I'll turn it over to you, and maybe you can just tell us about the different types of classes that are being offered and how students are learning on board the boat.
Great, thank you, Jenny. A couple of things that I just want to talk about. There, students who go on our semester-long program earn 6 semester credits, and they are awarded through Falmouth High School here in Falmouth, Maine. And they are in the fields of English language arts, mathematics, environmental science, maritime history, nautical science, as well as physical education and environmental science. So those are the areas that will be covered while you're aboard the HARVEY GAMAGE. Now, it's not like you necessarily sit down and have classes in those every day. Rather, those are the things that are integral to the experience of being aboard the HARVEY GAMAGE. You cannot spend time aboard the vessel, be a member of its crew, and not learn nautical science and not learn applied mathematics. You cannot sail up and down the East Coast of the United States, stopping at historic seaports, whether it be Charleston, South Carolina, Mystic, Connecticut, or whatever it be, and not learn maritime history. And in fact, we build our program, each individual semester, around where we're going to be. So for example, during the Southern Swing, students may be in Mobile, Alabama, and they will learn about the history of Mobile, Alabama. They will learn about the last slave ship brought ashore on the United States shores in 1861. They might be in Charleston, South Carolina. They might be in Mystic, Connecticut, and learn about, or New Bedford, Massachusetts, or Nantucket, and learn about the whaling industry. So we really do try and tailor the student's experience to where they are going to be. So that said, there are some constants, some through lines, because the goal here is to build the student's skill set so that they can ultimately run the vessel more or less on their own by the end of their time there. And Captain Pamela will talk a little bit about that. So we talk about skill development through the academic program, and I'm happy to respond via email to specific questions that people may have. But as far as your student is concerned, it's the same as a semester at most American high schools. You would walk away with 6 credits. So and at the end of the term, they will get a transcript from Falmouth High School listing the courses and the grades earned. And what we can tell you is that students do very well in this program, and that students who complete the program all earn full credit for their semester.
John, I'm curious if you can maybe share with the group who you would think this program is best suited for. What type of kid is good for this program?
So I would say that this is great for the kid who loves an adventure. This is great for the student who maybe is a little bored sitting in a classroom 6.5 hours a day, or certainly during this past year watching Zoom sessions. This is for the student who likes to be outside. This is for the student who likes to have a hands-on experience, or likes to have a sense of adventure. So if that's your young person, that's the perfect person for this. They don't, we have taken all types of students. We've taken students who are now at sort of the most selective colleges and universities in the United States, and we have taken students who have really struggled to complete high school. And the beautiful thing to witness on board the vessel is that they all come together and they are all equals and they all help each other do the task of being the crew of the Harvey Gamage, and they all apply and make sure that we have a great shot here of a young woman learning to take a noon sight on a sextant, which is one of the skills, one of the many. And then, of course, once they take that sight, then they have a whole bunch of mathematics to do to sort of calculate their position. That's a typical example of sort of like the real world application of the learning that occurs on the Harvey Gamage. So that counts for both nautical science and mathematics, right? So that's she's working on math credits right there, and it looks like she's just sitting in a beautiful sunny deck on a beautiful sunny day in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and she's also doing that. So, anyways, I digress. One of the great things is that all of the students from where as long as they have that, as long as the young person has a little bit of a sense of adventure, that's all it takes, and a willingness to give it a try. That's who we want, because they're going to be uncomfortable, they're going to be tested, but they're going to make it through, and they're going to feel a sense of, wow, I can do something that very few people get an opportunity to do, and I'm going to master some skills that very few people get an opportunity to master anymore. Does that answer your question, Jenny?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think might also be interesting is just to hear what happens after this program. So when they've spent this time on the boat, where do kids who spend a semester at sea go, and what do they do with that? I'm sure some go home and take a totally different course, but what kind of doors this might open for people?
So this can open a lot of doors for a lot of young people. And so for some young folks, they fall in love with the sea, and they become laser focused on heading off to find another opportunity to get out to sea, whether it's sailing. Here in Maine, we're lucky. We have opportunities, lots of opportunities for folks to sail on traditional sailing vessels. And so some of them will find their way to the schooner fleets out of Camden, or some of the other sail training vessels around the Northeast. Some say, "Hey, that was really cool. I'd like to learn more about careers in the maritime world." So they will, head off to work on tugs. They'll head off, or perhaps head to one of the state or federal maritime academies. We had one young woman went off. She thought this was really cool, but she decided that actually flying was more her thing. So she went off to the Air Force Academy. Other students, you know what? They just have a lifelong love of sailing, and they go off and do other things. We have students who get fascinated by boat systems, by the electrical systems, by the plumbing systems, by the mechanical systems, and so they decide to pursue that. So they might head off and pursue additional training in the world of diesel mechanics or in the world of electronics. So I mean, it really is. You can't classify who they are coming in or where they are going out. What you can say is that for the 8 weeks to 10 weeks that they're with our program, they are this unique community, all working together to make it happen.
Awesome. Thank you. So Pamela, I think we'll turn it over to you, Captain Pamela, and maybe you can share a little bit about yourself before we get into the crew. So I'll turn it to you, Pamela.
Oh, cheers. Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, John. The ship is an amazing place for these people to join. And not only are they joining as trainee crew, they'll be sailing with a professional crew. And what do I mean by a professional crew? Well, myself as a captain, I'm licensed to the U.S. Coast Guard. I have a 1,600-ton Ocean Master's license of both sail and power. And so that tells you that I have experience at sea, more than a couple of decades. I have education that is specific to taking people to sea and to keeping them safe. So the captain has a license as well as some very specific maritime training and experience to get there. The chief mate is also a licensed deck officer who may have the same experience and background as the captain, but also is working their way up to the captain's level. They are the person who runs the management of the ship. Our second and third mate, they usually come with some years of maritime experience, and they're expanding their credentials by sailing with the vessel. And what we know about each one of these licensed officers, they could be sailing anywhere in the industry. It's the love of working with young people that brings them to the HARVEY GAMAGE, of broadening people's view of what there is to experience in a tall ship at sea, that brings them and attracts them to sailing in this program. Now, the rest of the professional crew is made up of other skilled individuals. What kind of skills? The engineers, people who take care of all the machinery, the plumbing, the electricals, the outboards. We have real engineers taking care of that. The bosun is responsible for all the rigging, and that is a very good skill to have in a tall ship that has miles of line and rigging. Now, when you have up to 39 people on a ship, you don't want everyone making their own food, and you want someone planning it very thoroughly. So we have a professional cook who does all the planning and provisions the ship for many weeks at sea. And then when John was talking about the academic program, it's important that we get into a rhythm of the sea that includes and acknowledges everything people are learning. And with that, our program coordinators are the people who really plan how to make that fun. And our deckhand educators, they support all the operations on board. So there is a professional crew on board of at least 9 people, and sometimes more. And we're really fortunate that HARVEY GAMAGE and Sailing Ships Maine attracts in just the cream of the crop in the professional sailing world.
And they have a lot of fun together. That's so Pamela, I think that, I mean, so much of this program is about what you learn while you're operating a ship and learning to sail. And I think one thing we forgot to mention is that most of the trainees on the boat have never had sailing experience before. So tell us about the sail training, what they do and learn, and why, how it all ties together.
Awesome. I'm so glad you asked, because in a sail training program, it doesn't matter if you've had any experience on the water or not. You'll find that we emphasize safety. Now, safety begins with first understanding what's not safe and how many different ways you can very methodically and thoroughly prevent accidents, and be thorough and accountable to make sure you know what you're doing. We do safety training drills with our immersion suits should we have to abandon ship. We work with firefighting equipment because we are our own 911 out there. We do hourly safety checks on the ship to make sure nothing is going afoul in the ship. With that constant motion, things can come out of place, and it's important that we know exactly how well the ship is stowed and put together to keep her safe. The students, when they join, we first orient them to the ship, and that will include their emergency responses should any emergencies befall us. Things like man overboard, things like fire, things like grounding. And then we teach them how to prevent all those things. So it's really important that we look at things in a proactive manner on board.
So the sail training piece, and I think John touched upon this a little bit, that's sort of opening new doors and why we learn it, but I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that about the life skill piece too.
Indeed, especially in this day and age where so many people are wrapped up in their phones and learning online, to be in the environment where it requires you to pay attention to the dynamic changes of the wind, the weather, the seas, the interactions with your shipmates, how the ship is responding to those things, to do things in situ and learn as the ship and the natural environment requires your keen attention to detail and your readiness to respond to what the ship needs. What that engenders is it teaches the skills that people working together can accomplish far more than any individual. So the teamwork is really important, and a teamwork that is guided by someone who can lead the team. You will be in some situations that you're uncomfortable, and that's a natural part of going to sea, where the weather may be making you feel just a little bit too chilly or a little too wet. And knowing that you can get through that and feel really good is pretty amazing. Also, the technical competence that you gain on the ship is pretty amazing, because you can take some really easy tools like your hands and get things like angles. You can measure angles between celestial bodies. You can use things like sextants and really precisely measure angles between celestial bodies and the ocean. And by learning how to use these simple tools that are naturally with your body or that you can pull out of a case, you can really gain competence in understanding where you are on this earth. And it is a beautiful transition that people go through. When you finish aboard the ship, you can also find yourself very comfortable working around boats.
Thank you. I think part of that, these sort of next few slides and visuals are around the technical aspects of sailing a boat and the day to day. And so hoping you can kind of walk us through the watch standing, seamanship navigation, what the responsibilities are of the trainees and the crew when they're out there 24/7 on the boat.
Because the ship is underway continuously through the night, we don't expect any one person to be awake for the entire time. So we divide everyone into smaller groups. Those groups are called watches, and each watch stands a watch in which they take on the responsibility of the vessel. Now, one of those watch responsibilities is steering the ship. So that's a trick at the helm, the ship's wheel. We have people who stand lookout to look out for things that the ship does not want to encounter, be it heavy weather or other boats or rocks. And we also have folks handle sail. We have them set those big heavy sails. We have them strike and furl the sails. A sail vessel of this size requires a lot of manual labor to handle. The skills that you'll learn in caring for the sails will be using your hands and some tools to drive sail needles through the canvas. You'll learn how to handle lines of all sizes, from these smaller heaving lines that we throw to get a bigger line to a dock. And you'll also learn how to handle the bigger lines that are the halyards that haul the sails up and down. You'll find that when hauling together, you can accomplish far more. And each one of these lines has some mechanical advantage that because it is rove through blocks and pulleys, we call them tackles or just blocks. And by lining up together, you can accomplish a lot. And then you can see in one of these pictures, we have a team of people out in the head rig that they're furling some of the headsails, and that's a lot of canvas to fold and tuck so that it sheds seawater that splashes up and rainwater that comes down from the sky.
I think one of the things that people often wonder is if I'm doing a semester at sea, do I ever see land? Do I ever set foot on land? So the boats here are proof that you do get in some smaller boats and get to shore. And so maybe you can just talk about how the trip is planned and the port stops and what goes into the whole journey planning and mapping for a semester. I mean, you don't have to share everything because there's a lot that goes into that, but.
So there is things that go into voyage planning that have to do with paying attention to the prevailing winds and anticipated threatening weather. So we like to avoid areas that are hurricane prone during the hurricane season. And we like to go with areas that the prevailing winds will allow the vessel to go 2 different directions instead of just downwind away from a place. With choosing ports, we choose them very carefully based on their historical and current interest and the state of the ecology there, because we can learn a lot from where human impact has damaged a coastline, as well as what we can discover at a fairly pristine coastline. And then during this COVID pandemic, we have been very careful to not really spend a lot of time ashore and not go into port deep into cities and interacting with folks. So another part of voyage planning and where we choose our port calls has a lot to do with keeping everyone on the board safe and free of any risks. And right now, one of those risks is COVID. We can talk about COVID later on. We have a very thorough COVID prevention policy that everyone goes through before they join the ship. And those little boats, everyone does get time in the Whitehall Spirit. It's both sailing and rowing, and also working with the skiff and the rigid inflatable to drive a little outboard as a coxswain.
Thank you. So the next few slides are just talking about life on the ship and maybe sharing so trainees can envision what it's like to eat, sleep, live on board a schooner, and what they might expect in that kind of environment in terms of relationships and logistics and all of that. So a little bit about life on board the ship. Maybe we'll start first because family always comes first.
Yeah, so working together really does engender a family spirit because it takes a lot of people working in unison to accomplish the work that the ship has. It ends up being a lot of fun, and despite it being hard physical labor, it's very much enjoyable. We eat meals together, we cook and clean up together. And people will find ways to make some of the most basic things just a delight. For example, in this image in the upper left, it might not be obvious, but that water was freezing cold, just freezing. But they were making their way to the Rachel Carson Preserve, and they really wanted to get their feet in the sand. We have a crew that knows how to make the hard work a lot of fun. And then through that, people, sometimes they get nicknames that came from a single period in time that they said something funny, and it just stuck on them.
Yeah, sorry, I skipped over the food part, but that's always a big part. Every teenager, every young adult likes to eat. I mean, every adult likes to eat too. We can't lie about that, but they definitely have fun with making food and joining in. And I think one of the things that, you know, just that full team approach to everything, whether it's meals or meal cleanup and having different roles and responsibilities at different times. Kids really get involved in stuff they might not have to do at home, which is always a good thing. They'll be doing dishes when they come home. So thank you, Pamela. And as John said earlier, you know, this team is here for you to answer questions. And while you may be watching this in a recording and not live, you know, we are here to answer any questions you have, talk about how to get started. But before all that, you know, I think one of the best ways to learn about a program is to hear from somebody who's living it, maybe vicariously through his daughter. But Brad is here, and Brad's daughter is currently in the middle of her semester program. And while he doesn't have contact with her every day, he does get little snippets and has, you know, heard about her experience. And so, Brad, it would be so wonderful for you to kind of share with anyone who may be watching this about what really sort of has, you know, what led you to have your daughter join a trip like this, and what her experience has been like so far.
Yeah, like why would I put my teenage daughter on a ship for 3 months? Yeah, it's so my daughter's name's Hunter, and so she was 14 when she went on the ship. She's 15 now, so she had her birthday on the ship. She like John said, she was one of those that was kind of getting bored with the classroom and with public school, and not wanting the adventure is what I loved what John said about that. And it came to this opportunity about sailing ships in Maine, and I looked into it a little bit. And my sister, who's also a captain, said, "Hey, there's this opportunity. You may want to check it out. Who knows?" And so we looked into it, and it looked amazing. And the professionalism was what struck me first. You know, people like John and Pamela and yourself were all incredibly professional. We looked at the background of the company and about the people that were involved, and you know that, like Pamela said, safety has been first. That was a big deal, and the education that John mentioned was also a really big deal. Beyond the experience. And so when we approached Hunter and said, "Hey, there's this opportunity, are you interested in going?" She almost broke down in tears and was so excited. She said she's been planning something like this since she was 5, which I didn't know, but she had the actual moment when she says, "I was on my bed and I remember saying I was going to do something like this." So then it was the logistics of getting her on the ship, which, you know, sailing ships in Maine, everyone that was involved was incredibly helpful, from getting all the gear to, you know, what kind of gear to get, to what to expect. And we did it fairly late in the game. So we didn't have very much time to be able to get it all together. And we had incredible support, which just made us feel better. And then we were lucky enough, we were coming from Florida instead of Maine, so I was able to drive to South Carolina, to Charleston, to have her meet the ship, and see her walk off the ship and say, "See you later." And that's, you know, and that was it. But I felt comfortable, and as a parent, that's something I felt, you know, that she was going to be okay. And you know, like was said, we don't get that much communication, which I'm really glad for, because I want them experiencing and doing all the things that Pamela and John talked about, and that's what she's doing. And every so often, when she gets cell service, when they're in port, we get a text and saying, you know, everything's going good. And I say, "Are you still having fun?" She says, "This is funner than this is the most fun that I've ever had. It's way better than I ever could have imagined it to be." And she had big expectations. So that's a big deal. And she she talks about, and again, we've only been able to talk to her for a little bit, but she talks about, swimming in the Gulf Stream, about all the things that she is learning. Like she started to say about the wind. She's like, wait, you're not going to understand that terminology. She started using all the different terms that are on the boat and about sailing and about, weather. And so she had to like bring it down to my level, which was great. And I'm like, okay, she's learning, she's learning this stuff. And she talked about swimming in the Gulf. She talked about the bioluminescence. She talked about the dolphins. She talked about the hard work that is some of the hardest things she's ever done, and that she's absolutely loving it. And the relationships that both John and Pamela talked about, the relationships with the other crew members, but the other students that are on the boat. And these are, I said, are these going to be like lifelong friendships? And she said, absolutely, they're going to be lifelong friendships. So that team building and the relationships and the closeness and the hard work and the learning that she's learning is just been, it's beyond my expectations as well. It's been really good. And all the time, they tell you, you can track the ship, and they said, don't worry if it gets, if you can't track it for a while. So, of course I'm tracking it all the time. And I, because they warned us, sometimes you're not going to know, and it'll be 5 or 12 hours or whatever it is. But I know that she's okay. And every time I think they're halfway through now. They've met the 40 days, and she's looking forward to the other 40 days. And I think she's going to have a hard time getting off the boat. And she's just,
the goodbyes
yeah,
are often very hard. So everybody
yeah,
learned on that. Yeah.
she's hooked in many different ways. It's hard, but she's learning and she's creating those relationships, and it's just been an incredible experience in so many different ways. Like one of the moments she talked about, I think they were in one of the ports, and there were wild horses, and she was able to see a wild horse walked up right to her. And I'm like, did you touch it? She's like, no, it's a wild horse, Dad. You're not supposed to touch it. So that was a trick question, and she answered it right. So that was good. It's the learning in it is something that, like John and Pamela said, is something that you learn from so many different things, not just the one thing, and everything is interconnected. From when she was talking about the cloud formations and what those mean to all the different terminology and the parts of the boat, it's just been an amazing experience. I have another daughter that I hope will get on the boat as well, because like everyone has mentioned, it's a life-changing experience that gives them the confidence that they can do so much, and with teamwork. Yeah. So that's kind of that's my little speech with it.
Thanks, Brad. And I think that what you spoke about is that that word of mouth. And so for many families, this is so sort of out of the norm of something that your children or your family has done before, that having somebody else that you can talk to or ask the questions or go through all the biggest fears, everything that comes up with an adventure like this is, we have parents like Brad and others who are happy to connect you with, and you can get some firsthand experience from those students. But yeah, the goodbyes are the hardest. They and I think one thing that you spoke to, but maybe not so directly, is just how much confidence comes home with the trainees, and really having some ownership of what their new skill sets are, and also self-discovery of what are their strengths that they didn't necessarily know they had. So we're really excited that if you've lasted this long and are still watching and with us, we're really excited that you're exploring this opportunity, and look forward to a conversation with any and all of us as you explore next steps. And just want to thank you for spending the time with us tonight. So thank you all.